Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-eun in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. The government plans to provide additional financial support for companies that used to operate at the now closed Kaesong Industrial Complex in North Korea. President Moon and his Indonesian counterpart agrees to boost bilateral relations by facilitating investment in various fields, including tourism, energy, and infrastructure. These stories and more coming right up. The government will provide additional support to South Korean firms which had previously run factories in the now shuttered Kaesong Industrial Complex in North Korea. Our Kim Young-gil starts us off.
The Unification Ministry announced on Friday that it was planning to provide extra financial support worth $59 million to South Korean firms who had previously run factories in the Kaesong Industrial Complex. Out of the $59 million, $13 million will be used to compensate businesses who had invested in real estate, factories, and production machinery in Kaesong. $46 million will be used to compensate them for their current assets, including raw materials and products.
We hope the government's decision will help in supporting local companies involved in inter-Korean business projects to overcome their troubles and work with the government in looking towards the future.
The extra aid comes on top of the previous government's assistance of $463 million. The firms claim that the closure has resulted in more than $1 billion in losses, saying that the government's financial support is not sufficient to cover the damage. The Unification Ministry said that the fresh support will be able to cover some 74% of the damage. Seoul shut down the joint production zone in February last year in response to Pyongyang's nuclear and missile tests. The factory zone, which was launched in 2004, had accommodated over 100 South Korean firms which employed more than 54,000 North Korean workers to produce labor-intensive goods such as clothes and utensils. The South Korean government also plans to provide financial support for the first time to South Korean firms that invested in inter-Korean economic projects and suffered losses due to the 2008 halt to the Mount Kumgang Tour program and the 2010 economic sanctions on Pyongyang, known as the May 24th measure. In July 2008, Seoul suspended the Kumgang Tour project after a South Korean woman was killed by a North Korean soldier at the mountain resort. The program was launched in 1998 under a previous liberal government. Kim Young-gil, Business Daily.
The government held a public hearing on possible amendments to the Korea-US FTA this morning, where some chaotic scenes unfolded. Angry civic groups expressed their discontent with the trade deal, eventually forcing the Trade Ministry to call off the hearing. Our Lee Eun-shin reports.
Eggs were thrown, cuss words were said, and it even got violent. It didn't take long before Friday's public hearing on the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement turned into a disaster. The occasion was organized by the Trade Ministry to collect opinions from representatives of local businesses and industries so that they can prepare a more in-depth report for future negotiations with Washington. The government officials opened the hearing by briefing the groups on the benefits the bilateral agreement has brought about and what the nation can expect from amending the deal. But the statement sparked anger from civic groups from the agricultural and livestock industries at the hearing. Before market experts had a chance to report on the detailed analysis, the civic groups jumped up and insisted on speaking. They claimed their industry had suffered a great deal from the bilateral agreement and demanded the ministry officials take a closer look into the FTA's impact. Some farm owners and meat traders said that if the trade deal was to be revised, it had better provide compensation for the losses that these industries have suffered. However, they didn't provide detailed insight or numeric data to their claims. And as the people started turning violent, government officials called an end to the hearing. And it remains unclear whether or not another hearing will be organized by the ministry in the coming days. Korea and the U.S. agreed to revise the 5-year-old free trade agreement earlier this year on Washington's request. So far, there have been 2 rounds of trade talks between the countries, with no details on the next meeting confirmed yet. Yunshin, Business Daily.
President Moon Jae-in worked hard in Indonesia to boost the two countries' economic relationship. In an effort to elevate bilateral ties, the two sides inked a number of business agreements, potentially worth around $2 billion, covering transportation and other sectors. Here's our Hwang Ho-jun with more.
Boasting a 260 million strong population and an economic output that represents almost 40% of the entire ASEAN region, Indonesia has long shared economic interests with South Korea. That cooperation is just about to get even strong and far beyond the markets. Indonesia pulled out all the stops for South Korean President Moon Jae-in, complete with honor guard, children waving national flags, marching band, and ceremonial cannon shots. Despite the unexpected rain and gray skies, the presidents of South Korea and Indonesia shared ample amount of bonding, from an extensive one-on-one on the balcony, tree planting, and even a surprise trip to a nearby mall in a buggy driven by Mr. Widodo himself. Sharing the view that it is opportune for both to elevate their relationship to a whole new level, the two agreed to facilitate investment in various fields, including tourism, energy, and infrastructure, confirming new business deals worth $1.9 billion.
앞으로 양국 간 협력을 아시아는 물론 아시아 전체의 평화와 번영을 위한 협력 관계로 발전시키기 위해 한 인도네시아 양국 관계를 특별 전략적 동반자 관계로 격상하기로 합의했습니다. 저는 조코이 대통령께 우리의 대아세안 관계 강화 정책이 잘 구현될 수 있도록 인도네시아가 적극 성원해 줄 것을 요청하였고.
Among some 24 goals, boosting bilateral trade volume from a little over $10 billion today to $30 billion by 2022, and exploring new consultation mechanisms in the fields of foreign policy and defense.
Indonesia reaffirms our stance and urged North Korea to immediately comply with its obligations under the UN Security Council resolutions aimed at denuclearizing the Korean peninsula.
The Southeast Asian nation has traditionally had good relations with North Korea and is one of a few countries that maintains diplomatic ties with an embassy in Pyongyang. Having made his Southeast Asia debut in Indonesia, President Moon now moves on to Vietnam, the second leg of his three-nation trip, with his eyes fixed on the region as a North Asian economic powerhouse looks to curb its reliance on traditional trading partners and rally support against North Korea. Hwang Ho-jun, Business Daily.
And after wrapping up his state visit to Indonesia, President Moon has now arrived in the city of Da Nang in Vietnam for the next stop of his 8-day tour. Over the next 2 days, President Moon will attend the 25th Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, along with leaders and officials from 20 other member nations. On the sidelines of the APEC meeting, President Moon is expected to hold a bilateral summit with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. It will be the first meeting between the two leaders since Seoul and Beijing issued a joint statement to normalize their bilateral ties, which had soured over South Korea's deployment of a U.S. THAAD missile defense system. U.S. President Donald Trump is also visiting Vietnam, the fourth destination of his Asia tour. Following his state visits to Korea, Japan, and China, Trump appears to be making notable progress, not only regarding the North Korean issue, but also in terms of trade. Our Kim Mo-kyun reports.
Even before he embarked on his tour of Asia, the U.S. president stressed that trade and North Korea's nuclear provocations would be at the top of his agenda. After he landed in Japan, receiving a warm welcome from Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he did not hesitate to bring up the topic of Washington's trade partnership with Tokyo. President Trump said that the two countries need to do more to come up with a fair trade deal for both sides as the U.S. has suffered massive trade deficits with Japan.
We want fair and open trade. But right now our trade with Japan is not fair and it's not open, but I know it will be soon.
During his stay, Trump said the two leaders were also able to reach a deal where Japan will buy large amounts of American military equipment, which he referred to as the best in the world. In South Korea, Trump stressed the importance of the South Korea-U.S. alliance, especially in tackling North Korea's acts of provocation. He said that South Korea will be ordering more U.S. military equipment, which will help America to reduce its trade deficit and at the same time help both countries defend themselves from North Korea's threats.
We have the greatest military equipment in the world, and South Korea will be ordering billions of dollars of that equipment, which frankly for them makes a lot of sense. And for us, it means jobs. It means reducing our trade deficit with South Korea.
During Trump's stay in China, President Xi Jinping announced that Beijing and Washington signed trade deals worth more than $253 billion.
Our relationship with you and China is a very important one to me and to all of the people of our country. And just by looking at the tremendous, incredible job-producing agreements just signed by those major companies, we're off to a very, very good start.
After talks on trade, President Xi said that China is willing to increase imports of energy and farm produce from the United States, and that it hopes the United States will increase exports of technology for civilian use to China as well. Kim Mo-kyun, Business Daily.
Time now for a look through some important global business stories from the week with our Eunice Kim joining us in the studio today. Hello, Eunice.
Hello, June.
All right, so the week is busy in diplomacy, right? I mean, with the APEC summit in Vietnam, like we just heard in the reports. Now, it comes as President Trump has been showing a rather softer stance in his week of diplomacy so far.
He really has shown a softer tone, hasn't he, June? Especially playing to an Asian audience versus his constituency at home. Also, a very hearty welcome, of course, given to him in Japan, Korea, and China. But eyes continue to be on how the U.S. leader falls on Asian issues, particularly prickly ones such as the South China Sea, as Trump's so-called bromance was on display during this last trip in China. Take a look.
World leaders arriving in Da Nang, Vietnam on this Friday, where 21 APEC nations representing 60% of the world's GDP will engage over trade and investment. Here, U.S. President Donald Trump likely to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin after a whirlwind tour of talking trade with the leaders of Japan, Korea, and China. As he did in Tokyo and Seoul in the first half of the week, Trump was expected to address China's massive trade imbalance with the world's largest economy, in addition to coming to terms on a North Korea strategy. President Trump and First Lady Melania were given an unprecedented red carpet welcome Wednesday, 1 year since his atypical election win. Strengthened leader Xi Jinping, together with his wife, personally walked the Trumps through a tour of the relics of the Forbidden City before hosting them in the storied ancient home of emperors past, a lavish and notable reception never seen before for any global leader. The bromance between Xi and Trump would continue in the days ahead. True to his claim he is unlike past U.S. presidents, President Trump pointed to them for the trade imbalance he was in Beijing to fix.
Right now, unfortunately, it is a very one-sided and unfair one. But I don't blame China. After all, who can blame a country for being able to take advantage of another country for the benefit of its citizens? I give China great credit. But in actuality, I do blame past administrations for allowing this out-of-control trade deficit to take place and to grow.
A combined $250 billion in trade agreements were announced, including a $12 billion deal between U.S. chipmaker Qualcomm and Chinese smartphone makers. The biggest ticket item? A near $84 billion direct investment pledge by a state-owned Chinese investment body into American shale gas and chemical manufacturing to be released over 2 decades. Many of the deals were preliminary, non-binding MOUs, not enough to quell U.S. business concerns on overall Chinese market access. On North Korea, as with calls to open up, President Xi Jinping was careful to keep to Beijing's official line. He reaffirmed a strict adherence to UN sanctions, balanced with dialogue, a stance President Trump may even be warming up to, as he invited Pyongyang to come to the table and make a deal toward denuclearization.
I told President Trump that the Asia-Pacific is big enough for both the US and China. Both sides should increase communication and cooperation in regards to Asia-Pacific issues. Building the same group of friends forms constructive interactions that jointly protect and push forth regional peace and prosperity.
Well, a lot to process there, but I also hear that President Trump will be given a platform to address APEC leaders in Vietnam.
He will, as will several others, including Chinese President Xi Jinping after him. In fact, the Philippines' Rodrigo Duterte has already taken the stage calling for equitable wealth distribution in addition to wealth generation. But it will be interesting to see, Ji-yoon, how the U.S. leadership of the past in these APEC summits will materialize given President Trump's, America First platform. But, amid all of this diplomacy, there is one other M&A story we're watching on the semiconductor front that could impact many of these APEC members and their economies. This week, semiconductor firm Broadcom pushed out an unsolicited offer to buy Qualcomm. This for a record $105 billion US, adding it could go hostile on the M&A move. Now, this is very rare, and they are, of course, the number 4 and 3 in the global semiconductor market. So should this acquisition actually go through, it could create a formidable competitor to number 2 Samsung and also number 1 Intel. So far, it seems Qualcomm is pushing back to say it's not interested, but should it go through, once again, it would be the biggest acquisition in the world of technology to date. And both Samsung and SK Hynix stocks were seen falling this week following that news.
And finally, a quick look at Toshiba as the firm considers a capital injection to avoid a possible delisting from the Tokyo Stock Exchange.
Yeah, once again, they're finding themselves there. The capital injection could be worth up to 600 billion yen. That is roughly about $5.3 billion US in the form of new shares. An anonymous source told Reuters that while they haven't yet come up with a definite action plan, Toshiba is eager to make a final decision by the end of the year after examining various capital policies. With Toshiba's finances in a precarious state due to the bankruptcy of its U.S. nuclear unit, you will remember the Japanese company did agree to sell its prized chip unit, Toshiba Memory, to a consortium led by Bain Capital for $18 billion to beef up its balance sheet by the end of the fiscal year next March.
All right, thank you so much for that report today.
You bet.
And now moving on to our coverage of the markets, we have our contributor Lee Ji-hye on the line with us. Hello, Ji-hye.
Hello, Jian.
So tell us how local stocks performed on this last trading day of the week.
Sure, Jian. Local stocks traded mostly mixed today, with the Kospi closing 0.3% lower at 2,542.95, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq closed 1.53% higher to close at 720.79. Samsung Electronics was up 0.11%. SK Hynix fell 0.49%, and Hyundai Motors also fell 0.64%. Gains were mostly seen in manufacturing sectors, including POSCO climbing 1.25%. LG Chem was down 1.81%, and Naver was also down 1.33%. By sectors overall, display equipment, construction, and building materials, followed by broadcast and entertainment, were up by at least 2.4%, while space, aviation, and national defense, as well as the shipping industry, were all on the downward slope.
Now, can you tell us how other markets across Asia performed?
Sure, Ji-yoon, Asian shares were lowered today on uncertainty surrounding tax reforms in the U.S. following a plan released by Senate Republicans that was quite different from the version of the House of Representatives. This included crucial points such as a much-delayed timing of a corporate tax cut. Japan's Nikkei 225 lost 0.82%, coming down from Thursday's 21-year record high following a 16% rally in the past 2 months. Greater China markets hovered nearly flat, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index gaining 0.05% and the Shanghai Composite edging up 0.29%. The Shenzhen Composite was also up 0.79%. Overall, market strategists are saying that the demand for safe haven assets was mild and that this indicates a corrective action in the stock markets.
Now, a study released today showed that amendments to the Korea-US FTA would have little impact on the nation's GDP. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure. So 3 state research institutes said that they expected amendments are likely not to have visible impact on South Korea's economy, and also added that this is because Seoul and Washington have already scrapped tariffs in many sectors. The study was conducted by the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, the Korea Institute for Industrial Economic and Trade, and the Korea Rural Economic Institute. And researchers here say that tariff levels in the status quo were quite low to begin with, and the manufacturing sectors is not expected to see any notable fallout. The study added that South Korea's imports from the U.S. edged down 0.8% in the first half of this year compared to the year of 2012, while shipments to the U.S. rose 5.3%. This has been Lee Ji-hye for Business Daily.
Over at the National Assembly, lawmakers are on their 5th day of deliberations on the government's budget proposal for next year. The Budget Committee is coming through the $383 billion plan to see if the 12% increase from this year's budget is necessary. The ruling Democratic Party and the government will try to sell their people-first policy by saying the 2018 budget will help foster income-led growth. The National Assembly has until December 2nd to finish the review process before it's put up for a vote. Korea's tax revenues steadily increased in the first 9 months of this year. The finance ministry says the government collected more than $185 billion in taxes from January to September, up $16 billion from the same period last year. It represents 82.5% of this year's total tax revenue target. The consolidated government budget balance, which removes tax expenditures from tax revenues, posted a surplus of $11.4 billion as of September. Corporate tax income also rose more than $6 billion on year, tallied at $48.3 billion over the 9-month period. Samsung Electronics won honors from the Consumer Electronics Show 2018 Innovation Awards ahead of the event that's slated for January. The Consumer Technology Association awarded Samsung Electronics with 36 accolades, including 2 Best of Innovation awards for its TV and refrigerator. This marks the 7th consecutive year that the tech giant has received the honor for its TV segment. The Galaxy S8 and Galaxy Note 8 smartphones and the Gear Fit 2 Pro smartwatch were also among the winners. Along with Samsung, LG Electronics also won 18 innovation awards as well, including recognition for its OLED TV. A projector called the LG ProBeam TV and its V30 smartphone were also among the winners. November 11th is also known as Singles' Day in China, and it's the biggest day of the year for online shopping. So Korean firms are hoping to jump on the opportunity, especially with signs that China's THAAD retaliations may be easing. Our Elliot Kim tells us more.
People often think of Black Friday in the U.S. as one of the biggest shopping days of the year. But Gwanggeunje, or Singles' Day in China, is no slouch either. It's the largest online shopping day of the year. In fact, in 2016, Alibaba's e-commerce platform took in $17.8 billion in gross sales on Singles' Day, compared to the $3.3 billion spent online on Black Friday. Korean duty-free stores are putting up various promotions online, specifically catered towards Chinese consumers. While customers will need to travel to the country to be eligible, online shopping malls, retailers, and cosmetics companies are offering various promotions, ranging from discounts to shipping.
Those who purchase products at duty-free shops will be buying them a month or two before coming to Korea. So sales that happen now will show that customers plan to go to Korea in the future.
Strong duty-free sales would be a good indicator that Chinese tourists are ready to return. Airlines that had previously reduced the frequency of their Chinese routes are offering discounted tickets to Korea now that relations between the two nations have improved. With tensions thawing between Korea and China, and many people expecting the THAAD issue to be resolved, this could be the trigger that sparks duty-free businesses back to life. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week with more business news that matters to you. Until then, goodbye.